The Clear Lake Art Center is pleased to present the virtual exhibition and artist talk, Kindred Panoramas, Ceramics by Lisa Truax. Lisa Truax is originally from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. She attended Carthage College, gained a BA degree in studio art and graphic design with a business minor. After working in design for 5 years, she attended Michigan State University and earned her MFA in ceramics. She is currently an associate professor of art and design at St. Mary's University of Minnesota in Winona. She maintains a studio in Pickwick, Minnesota.
All right, thanks, Jeffrey, for having me and having my work at the Clear Lake Art Center, and I'll be showing my work and talking a little bit about it. So I'm going to get started sharing my screen so we can see some work here. And let me just put this into a full screen real quick. Okay, so this is the work that will be at the Clear Lake Art Center website. My work is really about the natural environment and our relationship with the natural environment. So all of these pieces are not only inspired by places that I've traveled, but also places that are important to me. They're ceramic. A lot of them are wall-mounted sculptures. So this one, which is called Atoll 3, has traditional ceramic glazes and materials in it, but also has sand and rocks from the Mississippi River on the right side, for example, and clay from my yard on the left side. There's an island near my house that is made up almost entirely of dredged sand from the bottom of the river. So it kind of looks like a natural place, although it's completely man-made. So I'm kind of looking at the things that we do to the environment and how we affect it, especially places like this where it might appear to be a natural thing, in this case, a naturally occurring island, but it actually isn't. And then the traditional ceramic glazes that I use in this case reference the color of water and looking at the river, because the Mississippi River is only about 2 miles from my house. So this one is looking a little bit at the aspects of mapping and understanding of place through topography. Also, the materials in this piece utilize things from the natural environment. So that kind of dark brick color is clay that was dug out of the bluffs around my home. There's recycled glass in here, dirt from my garden, which is a sort of little textury looking purple things in the purple area. And then the map is not a direct copy, but it's based on the topography of the bluffs around my house. And the different levels within that. So the mapping is sort of cut pieces of clay that are fused into this piece, is about 24 inches. It's a fairly large piece. And again, another piece of wall-mounted ceramic work. Especially during the pandemic, time in nature, I think for many people has become more important than it used to be. I've always been someone who enjoys and really finds energy in spending time in nature, but it's been really interesting to me during the last year to see how many more people seem to be taking advantage of that, and seeing many more people out, whether it's just to find something to do or maybe to try and improve their mental health. So I think that people reaching out to those things has been an important aspect, and I've really been thinking about that quite a bit throughout the last 10 or 11 months with the pandemic. This piece has clay from my yard where I used to live in Michigan. That's the kind of mustardy tan color, and sand from the Mississippi River on the bottom left area. I like using ceramic on the wall, even though it's not quite the traditional way to use ceramic, because I sort of think about these as three-dimensional paintings almost. The kiln is a very important part of how these are formed. And the surfaces really are transformed through firing in the kiln. This is a larger piece looking at different aspects of understanding of space, and they're not supposed to be directly representational representations of different particular places, but more the things that kind of stick with you over time and your memories about different parts of places. So in this example, on the backside, which we'll look at in a moment, there are a map of the Mississippi River carved into the piece. Whereas if you were actually in this space experiencing it, the things you would see and for me and remember are like the sand that makes up the islands and the sandbars, the different colors of the different depths of moving water, which can be blue or brown at different times of year, the native clays that might be sticky along the edges, and kind of how those things interact with different ways of being in the place yourself, looking at them, or when you climb up to the top of one of these tall bluffs, how it might look from far away. And I kind of think about integrating all of these different things together. So on the back side, the map continues from one piece to the next. This is a fairly representational map of the river about 2 miles from my home. And it includes the map of that artificial island that I mentioned, where I collected some of this sand. Although the island is artificial, it is highly used by nature, and it's always got turtle eggs on it. So I just think it's really interesting how nature has claimed these places and made it an important part of their ecosystem. This piece is looking at mapping from a more direct vertical aspect. I've broken up the different levels of maps into higher and lower areas. This one is about the Lake Michigan, where I used to live in Wisconsin. This sand is from the beach near my house, and the dark blue is kind of thinking about the color of the lake and the way those two things mix together, especially on the edges, thinking about wintertime when there's very dramatic waves crashing on the beach, and the kind of feel that that has is the memory that I was going for with this. I'm also really interested in places that are important to us personally and how they become important to us, whether it's because we interact with them frequently, and that these places may not even be noticed or important to others. So there's places that we consider culturally important, such as Rocky Mountain National Park or Yellowstone, that everyone has sort of agreed to be important and beautiful places. But for most of us, those aren't places we get to go frequently. And that trail that goes out behind your house, or the state park down the road, or that city park might be the place that you go to when you need to spend time outside or want to interact with nature in some way. And that these places can almost be sort of forgotten or taken for granted. And I have been considering during this pandemic period if maybe people are becoming more appreciative of those places that are easily accessible around them, that we can still get to and spend time in without putting ourselves and each other at risk. This is another piece called An Understanding of Place. On one side, it integrates, in this case, the little black spots on the left are metal shavings from my neighbor's metal shop. He was a tool and die maker before he passed away. So these are little steel shavings melted in with clay from my yard and sand from the river, along with traditional glazes. On the backside of this is another map coming up towards the Pickwick Valley where I live, and the drainage area and the lowlands on the other side of the river near where I live. So the little creek coming down on the left side, actually I live really right on the little twisty part in the thin area. So this is kind of a mapping area of where I live. Here's another similar piece, different location. I'm looking more at the blufflands around here. And the rocks on the top left are actually, when they dump all this sand on the road in the wintertime, I had scooped some of that up. And around here, that sand comes from the river. So I will find seashells and other things in there on my street, because they use that dredge sand to put on the roads when it's snowing, like it's going to be later today. And here is a map of this bluffland area closer to where I work on the other side of that. I think maps are kind of interesting because they're a very sort of, in some ways, abstract way of understanding space. It's different than the interaction when you're actually in a place. So I was kind of thinking about the two aspects of that when I was looking at these pieces from the front and the back. This is a pedestal piece. I don't have as many of these flat pedestal pieces that I've made, but this one was definitely more of an abstract one, just thinking about the Mississippi River in winter and how these big pieces of ice will break off and float and crush up on each other, and the way that looks from when you hike to the top of a bluff. There's some public land that's very underutilized near my home, and I use it quite frequently to hike on, and you get these really dramatic views of the river from the top, and seeing how the river changes every day during the wintertime especially. And here's a close-up view of that. I definitely integrate traditional ceramic materials and glazes along with my locally found materials. So the blues and the whites in here are normal ceramic glaze. And on the right side and the left side, I've got native clay and sand on the right side. I use the same sand that they have used for fracking, and that was and has been mined in Winona County for fracking, although it is actually illegal here now to mine frac sand. But I use that kind of as another environmental aspect in my work, to take the same sand that they would use for fracking and integrate it into my ceramic work, either as a surface decoration or mixed into the clay in replacement of traditional grog. Here's a smaller wall-mounted piece. This is more of a kind of faraway view idea. Some of them like this are not necessarily based on a specific place, but more just memories of different travels and water and land and things like that. I collect materials, many places that I'll travel where it's allowable to do so. I especially like to get things from areas that are being changed or worked on, like construction areas, piles of sand on the side of the road, things like that, that would maybe be looked at as trash or waste or things that have to get moved. These can be areas where I will find things to use for my work, such as in these couple of pieces. This is a larger installation. In my larger installations, I usually use materials from a wider range of places versus specific places that are referenced in many of the smaller works. So there is anything in here from the pink on the left side is ground stone from central Wisconsin. There's rocks and dirt in here from a trip out west that I was collecting at roadsides, clay from my yard in Michigan, and in Minnesota where I live now, some of those pieces of metal from my neighbor's shop. So these sort of become visual representations of memory for me in different places that I've been, whether it was traveling or visiting family, and those kind of things. So sort of visual references. And also the colors that I choose are supposed to visually reference memories of these places in an abstract way. You know, maybe the blue of that lake stuck with you and I'll try and capture that kind of thing. Or the very yellow one on the top sort of left would be looking at remembering some of the kind of very intense colors at a place like Yellowstone. This piece integrates mapping along with one of the similar melted pieces from below. This one, the ceramic piece on the top, is actually a separate part with a wooden sort of disc on the outside that it's holding it in there. So it sort of is separating the map from the landscape below and creates more, I think, interesting shadows, sort of overlaying how the topography of this place might be with the actual place underneath, but they're not integrated into each other. Technically, this piece also was pretty challenging because those pieces are very thin and long, and clay doesn't really like to do that. So it was also kind of an interesting piece for me to make, as far as like technical aspects would go. These pieces really, I can't tell what they're going to look like until they come out of the kiln. Obviously, I know what colors and things that I put into there, but it's always sort of a surprise exactly how the different colors and materials and sands and clay and other things are going to mix together in the kiln. These all have to be fired flat on their, like laying down, or the piece stuff would just run everywhere. So I'm a little bit limited in some of the forms I can make. But that's okay to me because I look at these as sort of ceramic paintings, and looking at them is sort of almost like a photograph or a map memory of these different places. And I want to thank Jeffrey and Clear Lake Art Center for giving me the opportunity to do this show.